Good evening. Welcome to the Mom to Mom Show, brought to you by ECRC and Martoma Productions, featured live on the Healthy and Moms of Metro Detroit page. My name is Lisa Denham, your host for tonight, and joining me are Judge Linda Davis, a district judge in Clinton Township, and Heather Nofer, a counselor.
Stephanie
Oh, I'm sorry. Stephanie Nofer, a counselor who is the lead counselor at Hope and Counseling.
Correct.
We are here to discuss marijuana use in Michigan now that it's legal, and we're hoping that you would also join us by typing in questions that you may have for our panelists here. Ladies, welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having me.
having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Judge?
Okay, well, I've
Davis?
been a district court judge for 19 years, and the bulk of what I deal with are cases involving marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs. I also run a drug court, one of the larger drug courts in Michigan, and I also am the president of a statewide organization called Families Against Narcotics, where I educate all over the state about addiction and drug use.
Very nice. Stephanie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a licensed professional counselor and also a certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor. I have a private practice in Sterling Heights called Hope and Counseling. We have about 4 or 5 other therapists there. I specialize in addictions, though.
Very nice. Well, voters in Michigan, I want to say it was in 2008, approved Proposal 1, where they made it legal for marijuana to be used for medicinal purposes.
Right.
But in November of 2018, it became legal for recreational use. Were you surprised at all, Judge, that this became legal?
No, I was not. I think that when we legalized medical marijuana, it was kind of a lead-in to a fast-moving train to get recreational marijuana legalized as well. We softened people to it, to the idea of marijuana being a medical drug. And as a result of that, I think a lot of barriers were broken down and people really got confused about the differences between medical and recreational. And a lot of people truly did not even know what they were voting for.
At the time. So you felt when that ballot was passed in November of, was it 2008, I believe?
Yes.
Or you did see this coming then?
Absolutely.
You felt?
yeah.
Yeah. Stephanie, did you notice a difference once it was passed in 2008 for medicinal use? Did you notice a difference at all with patients coming in maybe addicted to a spike in patients coming in addicted to marijuana or
Yeah,
having
we definitely
issues?
did see a larger population that was admitting to the use, that was, using it way more often than they probably should have been. A lot of people were getting medical marijuana cards under false pretenses. So, I mean, it was definitely a very large spike, definitely.
Judge, when they legalized marijuana for recreational use, what is the age limit to purchase?
It's still illegal to use if you are under 21 years of age. So it's very much like alcohol in this country, that you have to be 21 to drink legally. You also have to be 21 to smoke legally.
You do. So then the dispensaries are available for anyone to walk in, but as long as you're over 21, you're allowed to purchase it.
Right. We are, but it still does open up possibilities for use with young people, because a lot of marketing of marijuana is geared toward children. They market it in gummy bears and brownies, cookies, all of those things that are really palatable to young people. That's how the dispensaries will be marketing it, and you'll be able to find marijuana in all those different forms. So it's not just like walking in and buying a bag of weed. You can buy it in all kinds of different forms, and so it's going to be very favorable for children looking at that and mistaking it. A parent buys gummy bears and lays them on the counter, and a toddler sees those. Guess what the toddler's going to do? So they really are marketed for children, even though they cannot sell them to them.
I see. And at this point, are they doing anything to ensure that the dispensaries are following the law?
Well,
and how they sell it?
There really aren't dispensaries yet. That isn't all up and running.
Okay.
But they will be required to check license and ID to make sure that you are of a legal age when you are buying it.
I see. Can you please tell us a little bit about what the law in Michigan states as far as what we can do now that it's legal to use it recreationally? Because I'm under the impression you could, now that it's legal, you can just go in, purchase it, and smoke it wherever you want. Because everywhere I go, I seem to smell it now. But is that the case? Are you allowed to really just go out and smoke since smoking is banned now?
Yeah, no, you cannot do that. Just like you can't smoke every place you want to, and you can't drink everywhere. You can't open a beer in your car and drive around with a beer open. You also can't do that with marijuana. It's supposed to be done in the privacy of your home in non-public places. So if it's being done where people can smell it, see it, that's a public place, you still cannot do that even under recreational marijuana laws. It's for the privacy of your own home.
And you can only buy up to 2.5 ounces a day, I think it is. And you can only have about 10 ounces, I believe it is, and in your home, but it has to be locked away too. So there still are rules about, what can and cannot happen, even with it being quote unquote legal.
Stephanie, do you see it as a gateway drug?
I think in some instances, yes. I think that the younger children use it. I think that it can lead to being a gateway drug. I think that some people can definitely use it recreationally every so often. But I think the younger that people start, I think the more addictive it will be. And the more we're just not seeing the real reasons behind it, like why do they feel that they need to have a mind-altering drug? Like what's going on for them to need something that is going to mask something else maybe. So I think it can be, absolutely. I don't think it is for everybody.
So you think that now that it's legal for recreational use, and possibly these laws could be changing, and they could actually make it a little bit more accessible, it's going to be something that people are going to turn to self-medicate versus actually finding out what is wrong with whatever it is
I
that's
definitely
going
think
on?
that it can be that, and it's hard to tell which comes first. If like you already had symptoms of depression or anxiety or any kind of trauma, anything like that, and then to self-medicate, we don't know what came first. Did the marijuana cause some symptoms? Did it exacerbate some symptoms? It's hard to tell, and it's hard to treat that way too, because we don't know if someone is self-medicating. We don't know if, this depression was already there, or if the marijuana is causing it.
So it's a possibility that marijuana can cause depression or paranoia.
In some cases, it can be used as it is a depressant. It just depends on how your body reacts to it. It's just like taking Benadryl. Some people will fall asleep with it. Some people get overly hyper with it.
Right.
So we just don't know.
I think the bottom line to that too is that we really don't know the effect that it has on people. And just like with alcohol, a lot of people will tell you they drink because they're depressed and it makes them feel better. Well, that window of feeling better is very little, and we all know now with the studies that have been done on alcohol that it's actually a depressant. So if you're already depressed and you're using alcohol, you become more depressed, and yet people were using it for just the opposite. We don't know enough about marijuana and the effects that it's going to have on the brain yet to say how will it react with someone who has a depressive personality or a bipolar disorder or those kind of things. They're just taking a chance when they use it.
Yeah.
So, Judge, I have the first question actually asked is they're asking what are your feelings about marijuana?
Okay,
Which I think
well,
you made pretty clear.
I don't smoke marijuana, so I'll make that very clear right off the bat. I will tell you that I am not anti-marijuana. I think there were some good medical reasons that people used marijuana. It clearly diminishes pain if you have things like cancer. So it can be used for that. I think that we extend that, like I've heard people say, oh, you can use it for glaucoma, and yet when I've talked to eye doctors, they say the amount of that you would have to smoke to to make your eyesight better would be so astronomical that you wouldn't be able to walk if you did it. So that's not really a medicinal reason to use marijuana. But I think that we passed this law before we knew enough about marijuana, and that was my whole stance. I didn't come out and say I'm against legalizing marijuana across the board. I just said I think we're premature in doing that. We need more studies on how is secondhand smoke going to affect children in the home? How is secondhand smoke going to affect the development of the brain in young people if they are around adults that are smoking it all the time? What effect long term is it going to have if mothers smoke marijuana and they're pregnant? We have a lot of things we don't know about marijuana, and there are so many different levels of THC in marijuana that we don't know, like at what level are you too drunk to drive? So to me, if you're thinking clearly, you want to know the answers to those questions before you legalize something that's going to open up the floodgates and potentially lead to a lot of problems. I just think we did it too fast, too quickly, and the pro-marijuana people had a lot of money into putting into advertising that made people think there were positives in doing this that I don't think really
Why
have
do you
been
think the
proven
state
yet.
allowed it, in your opinion? Why, if the proper studies weren't there, why do you think the government allowed it? Why is the federal government?
Well, why did the government allow opiates to be used or put cocaine in Coca-Cola? All of those things happened, and we were given these advertisements that told us these were safe, that you could use them, that you wouldn't get addictive, and yet there were no studies behind that that showed that. And so we did exactly the same with marijuana. We jumped the gun on it before we knew enough about it.
We have a few questions here. Claire did say, this is not a question, but she said exactly not enough studies that have been conducted on marijuana for it to be legal. And then we have a question, what does the judge think about growing marijuana at home with kids? I think that's just more, it's not illegal, it's just a personal issue.
Right. It's
we're
like
also
asking me
confusing
what
them.
do you,
Yeah.
it's like asking me what do you think about someone drinking too much at home. Obviously, I'm opposed to that if you have children.
Yeah.
Good parenting means that you are a responsible parent. And so children mimic what they see their parents do. And if that's the lifestyle you want to present to your child, that is your right as a parent under the new laws. But do I think it's a healthy environment for children? No.
No. And Stephanie, you were bringing up a point about how parents are kind of contradicting themselves. They're teaching their kids to follow one set of rules while
They're doing another.
Doing
Well, I mean,
another.
because it is legal for them to grow it in their house, okay, fine. But we're also telling children to say no to this drug and not to be involved in anything about it. But then we're growing it in our homes. We are saying that we're okay with giving this to other people, just not our own kids. So what is that, like, how are we really going to teach our kids correctly? They're going to look at us and say, but you're growing it, you're giving it to other people, why not me? So really, we're just causing a lot of confusion for kids.
Children need consistency
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
messaging, and we're all over the board with
And I
this
think
on
at
what
this
our
point,
messaging
even
is.
growing it in your home has to be dangerous
Absolutely.
when you have children at home. You know,
I've heard of someone who, a child got into their basement and knocked something over or something like that, and a small fire happened. We just don't know, like, what children will get into. You know, you can't be with them. You can't have your eyes on them 24 hours a day.
24.
So we're just giving them more, I guess, access to more trouble.
Right. Stop and think about, we know that parents that smoke, their children are more likely to smoke. We know that parents that drink in front of their children are more likely to drink. If you're an alcoholic, you're more likely to have an alcoholic child. And I just think it stands to reason with those things that if you're going to smoke marijuana in front of your children, you can pretty much expect that they will do the same thing down the line.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in terms of like self-medicating and masking things, because if they know that their parents come home from a bad day at work and then smoke marijuana to, get rid of that bad day, that's how they're going to handle their issues in the future too. Is, okay, well, when I have a bad day, I'm going to drink or smoke or mask it, because that's what we do, instead of like talking about it, instead of actually like getting to the root of, some issues. It's going to be, well, my parents taught me that when I had a problem, this is how I handled it.
From a legal standpoint, if you're caught with more than the legal limit of marijuana, what is the penalty?
It's a fine.
It's just a
Yeah,
fine.
it's not a jailable offense anymore.
How about if you're a minor caught with marijuana?
It's a fine.
Yeah, and then in some cases, if you're under 18, it's, court mandated counseling,
That would be it. So,
which is also a fine.
Yes, a big fine.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
years ago, you would watch a movie where somebody would be portrayed as a stoner coming to work, and it's more of let's say, a funny scene, and you're watching this person that's high at work and not being able to function properly, and we're finding this scene to be funny. But for now, with a lot of employers, this is the reality.
Right.
So what rights do employers have if their employees are smoking marijuana on the job or coming in high?
Well, smoking on the job is illegal.
Yes.
Employers have the same right that they would have if somebody was drinking on the job. I mean,
Or came to work drunk.
right, or came to work drunk. You would not allow that. Employers, unfortunately, are telling me constantly that they're having a hard time keeping a workforce because they drug test, and there are so many people that are testing positive for marijuana, and it's not safe to work in their environment, particularly if it's a factory or you're using heavy machinery. They can't allow that. It's a safety risk, and so people are having a really hard time finding employees because of the marijuana issue and people coming to work high. So they do not have to allow it. They can drug test. They can set their own policies. They're their companies.
Okay. So a lot of people will compare marijuana to drinking alcohol. And that seems to be the argument, that
Instantly.
alcohol is just as bad for you. It could hurt your liver. You could become intoxicated, that you can actually smoke marijuana and still continue to function fine. From what I see, people are they'll smoke marijuana like they're smoking a cigarette, and they think it's comparable. Maybe the feeling of it or whatever it is that they're getting out of it, whatever they're addicted to, but it does alter things versus cigarettes don't, and you rarely will find somebody that will drink on the job versus taking a smoke break and going outside and smoking marijuana. So what is your opinion about marijuana being compared to alcohol?
Well, like I feel like I've responded to a few Facebook posts about that, where I wouldn't be okay with my loved ones drinking every day or in the amounts all day. As much as you'd take a cigarette break, I would not want my loved one drinking alcohol that much. And anything in excess is going to be a bad thing. So I never understand that, because it doesn't really matter. A harmful substance is a harmful substance. It doesn't matter that one is legal or one isn't. It doesn't matter. They are still harmful. I don't want anyone to be around me drinking every single day in the amount that people are smoking marijuana. So it's the same to me. I don't know why people always think that it's different, that we legalized alcohol and never looked back, but we still do. People are alcoholics. People do get treated for that. People have died of cirrhosis. People have, been behind the wheel drinking and driving, and there are serious consequences to that regardless.
Yeah. Look at treatment in this country. I mean, we have alcohol clinics everywhere, and there's a large number of people that start drinking alcohol and it gets out of control and it ruins their life. Marijuana can do exactly the same thing if used in excess. That doesn't mean that everybody that smokes marijuana is going to do that. There's responsible use and there's irresponsible use.
Right.
But just because it became legalized doesn't mean that you're perfectly safe waking up in the morning and starting like you would, like you said, with a marijuana joint instead of a cigarette and smoking it the entire day. It's not a healthy lifestyle.
Would it be safe then to say it's legalized for recreational use? It just has to be monitored and
Used responsibly.
but still be legal like the way alcohol is. So we're talking about not everybody that drinks socially is an alcoholic.
Right.
So why can't it be that marijuana can be legal and people could smoke it recreationally, and
And I hope
society
they do.
shouldn't have a
That
problem?
would be the hope, is that
Yeah.
they smoke it responsibly and it doesn't become an all-day habit for
But
them.
if you think back on when it was legalized for medicinal purposes and how many people obtained marijuana cards illegally and under false pretenses, that you kind of have to assume that we're not going to have more responsible smokers than we do irresponsible ones.
Yeah.
You know, it's unfortunate.
When marijuana was legalized for medicinal reasons, there was a standard. You had to have a medical reason to take it, which required a bona fide doctor who treats you regularly, saying that you needed marijuana for whatever your ailment was. I probably handled 25,000 medical marijuana cards, and of those, I've only gotten 2 letters from doctors for bona fide reasons to use it.
Wow. So we have some questions here. Since it's federally illegal, what's to stop the federal government from raiding in or closing all of the illegal, or closing all the legal marijuana businesses? Why is the federal government not getting involved?
I can address that
Yeah.
mainly because the federal government usually does not try to override what states have decided to do. The people in Michigan have spoken. And so there are some complications with it being federally against the law, like you can't put the money that you make from a dispensary into a federal bank. So it's like, what are people are going to do with that large amount of money? Hide it under their mattress, which will not be safe, obviously. So there's some issues like that, but I don't think you're going to see the feds coming in and swooping in on people that are growing marijuana for personal use. If there are people growing large amounts for consumption or to sell on the black market, I think you'll still see those things targeted by the federal government, but I don't think they're going to override what the states have on their own said that they would allow in that state.
Yeah.
Well, so we have here, I'm trying to go over some of these questions. Let's see here, Valerie. So we all own or have owned a liquor store and sold alcohol and cigarettes, but still have instilled in them and taught them that it's bad to do that. Some of us drink, some of us smoke cigarettes, not that I do. So I guess she's basically saying, not that I'm for marijuana, but what is the big difference between the three, and which we've already addressed. Valerita, we discussed why is marijuana an issue just because it's legal now? So I'm
I'm
assuming,
sure when alcohol first was legalized, they probably had the exact same discussions, and the same thing with cigarettes. And you know, it's new, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of research on it, and so it's scary. We're walking in kind of blindly here. So of course, it's going to be discussed and brought up, and it's an issue because we're not familiar with it yet.
right. I think opioids is just as much of a crisis, but all we're hearing about is the marijuana because it is now legal, and people are assuming that it's okay to just
Yeah.
go around smoking, and it's not.
Right.
It's only
Yeah, you need
legal
to
in your
understand
own
what your
home.
legal rights
Yeah.
are if you're going
Yeah.
to do it, so that you don't end up with an issue not intending to.
Yeah.
Would legalizing marijuana remove a major source of funding for like foreign drug traffickers? Would it make it less likely that they would come in here and push the drugs on people if we're legalizing it and it's easier for people to access
I
legally?
don't
I
think,
think
I
there's-
don't, yeah, I think
yeah.
some of the drug stuff is not exactly marijuana. I think we're dealing with a lot heavier stuff there.
We are, and it's not going to take revenue away from them either, because even out in Colorado where marijuana has been legalized recreational for a while now, they still have a huge black market for marijuana in Colorado. You know, the prices go up because it's being taxed. You only can buy certain levels of marijuana. It's divvied up in portions, et cetera. So if you want to go buy cheap marijuana, you're going to go to a black market to do that.
And of course, it's available to
Right.
you. So, how does cultivating marijuana affect the environment?
Well, I only know from what I've heard people in Colorado say that it's very damaging to the environment. And I know that the professionals in Colorado, I've gone to many seminars from them, and I'm only repeating what they've told me, is that they spend more on cleaning up the environment because of the legalization of marijuana than they bring in the taxes, that they make very little money in the states off of
They do.
the recreational marijuana laws.
So and that was that kind of ties into the question I was gonna ask about the revenue that the state could get from legalizing marijuana. Is it actually worth it? Does the state really generate that much more of an income from taxes?
Not if you look at other states that have done it. You have to offset. Sure, they can say, hey, we taxed and we brought in $3 million in taxes on this. But then you have to look at the cost of that. Are we putting more people into treatment? Are there more car accidents? Are insurance rates going up? There's a whole slew of things that have to be taken away from that profit margin. And then you have to look at what your real margin is. And from what other states have said, they lose money on it rather than make money on it.
So we talked about a little bit about how it can affect, we really don't know how it's going to affect unborn children, secondhand smoking. Can it decrease an IQ level?
We really don't know yet.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough studies, and which is takes me back to the reason you asked me if I was for or against it, and I said at this time I was against it because those are all things that before I would vote to have something legalized in my community, I would want to know and have that information first.
And are we willing to take those chances? Like, are we willing to take the
These are our
chance of
children.
our children, you know, getting the secondhand smoke, or our unborn children, or, you know, are we willing to really risk that for this? Considering we know that like alcohol is bad for that, for our, when pregnant. We know cigarettes are. So like we know this is in some way the same type of substance, and are we really willing to take that chance? Like, do
Why
you
are
want to
we
do
willing
that?
to
Yeah,
take that
exactly.
chance? You know, especially when we're really pushing healthy lifestyle nowadays, to smoke something that we really don't know much about.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and the long-term effects. Thank you again for tuning in. Please feel free to ask any questions. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and Judge Davis and Stephanie are here to answer any questions that you may have. So we encourage you, please share your questions with us. Stephanie, question for you. What should a parent do if they catch their child? I say child, but really hopefully a teenager, young
teenager-ish,
adult.
yeah.
They are children.
Their children.
Yeah.
What should they do if they catch their children with
I mean,
marijuana
what
or
would-
any drugs, not just marijuana?
What would our parents do if we were caught drinking in the back of the school or smoking a cigarette? You know, I think that we need to be a lot more assertive about this because it is illegal for our children under 21. So, you know, I know that some people say, well, I let my child drink when they're at home with me because I'd rather have, that doesn't make a lot of sense because you are still teaching an unhealthy habit. You know, and so just because they're doing it in front of you doesn't mean they're not doing it behind you as well. So I just think, you know, being assertive about it and making sure that you explain to your children the effects, whether we know them or not. I don't want to take the chance of my child's IQ or their health or their lungs or their whatever other organ that can be affected. You know, teaching them the right thing, you know.
One thing that we know for sure is that your brain doesn't develop fully until you're 25 years of age. And we also know that the impact of drinking, cigarettes, and almost any other drug, young people are much more susceptible to addiction with those. You can get addicted to opiates much easier as a child before development of your brain than you can as an adult using the same amount. So I think if we apply those same principles, that we know that a young person's brain is going to be affected more severely and differently than an adult brain, that we need to do and teach our kids that this could have a real impact on their future if they start using it as a young age. Correlation with alcoholism. The younger you start drinking, the
Yes.
more chance
I
there
was
is
just
that
gonna
you're going to
mention
be
that.
an alcoholic. The same thing is true with any substance. The younger you start using it, the greater the risk is that you're going to have a problem down the line, whether it's smoking, alcohol, or marijuana. It's true for all drugs.
All of them. What is a good age to start talking to your children about using drugs?
As soon as they're exposed to it, as soon as they hear it, smell it, know
I
of
don't
it.
think there's. I think
Yeah.
where we make a mistake in this country is our kids grow up very fast because of TV and social media.
Mm-hmm.
That as soon as they're able to learn, you need to start reading them books
Absolutely,
about
yeah.
it. You need to start having conversations with them about it, and just have open dialogue with them from the age that they're able to understand.
Judge, have you seen an increase in crime at all since marijuana? I don't even want to say since it's legalized for
Well, it really hasn't
recreational
taken
use.
effect yet in
Yeah.
Michigan. So,
Yeah, to me,
although it's legal, we really don't have
Yes.
dispensaries and people aren't using it. I don't think you see the kind of crimes that you're asking about. I think we're going to see an increase in drug driving because people aren't going to just smoke at home at night. They're going to do, like you said, start smoking early in the day and then drive their cars. And we do know that it alters your perception and how you do things and everything. So I think you will see an increase in accidents and maybe fatalities with drug driving. But I don't think you're going to see people going out and robbing stores just to get personal use marijuana. But you know, there are dispensaries. There's going to be a lot of money involved in this, and wherever there's a lot of money, just like there is with casinos or anything else, you're going
Yeah.
to see a spike in some crime.
Yeah.
With one thing I wanted to ask for parents with teenagers, can a teenager 16 and older obtain a medical marijuana card from a physician without a
No.
parent's consent?
No.
So
No,
they have to
definitely
have
Same rules for
parental-
anything medical. You have to have parental consent. And there would be a doctor needing to say that there was a medicinal reason to do that. Now, I have heard of young children with cancer that were given marijuana, but they come in pill forms. You don't have to let a child sit and smoke a joint to give them marijuana. And I think we oftentimes forget that, and that was kind of my saying with the medical marijuana thing, is if you're going to use it for medicinal reasons, then why not have doctors write prescriptions for the pill form of it? And that just takes all the guesswork out of it. We know exactly what they're getting, how much they're getting, but when you're buying marijuana out on the street for medicinal reasons, you don't know what it's laced with, you don't know what's been added to it, you don't know what it's being cut with.
I think
There's
that's
all
one of the
kinds
scary
things.
things now is I call them fake drugs.
Right.
And I have children, so I always try to teach them the first time you could try a drug could be the last time. Because
Absolutely.
you just don't know what's in it. It
Right.
could kill you the very first time. It doesn't even have to be an overdose. It could be a reaction to what's actually in that drug.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and that might be one of the arguments that people would give for having dispensaries. At least you are regulating what's in it, and if you're buying it on the street, you don't know if it's laced with fentanyl. So there are some good things about the legalization of it, but I haven't seen what the regulations are yet. Like, what level of THC are you going to be able to put in these products, and how high will it go?
And what's
then
going to
what
be
do
the
we know
limit
about
for
those
driving?
levels?
You know,
Right.
because someone that smoked a whole week, and then drove that 8th day, is it still in your system, and
It
how
stays
much?
in your
And
system for up to 30 days, but
exactly.
at what point is it no longer dangerous for you to get
Yeah.
behind
Yes.
the wheel
And
of a
how does
car?
a person know
So
that?
We
is
don't
there
know
a
that.
legal limit? If
We
you
don't
get
know
pulled
that.
over and you're high, what does the police officer do? Obviously, I mean, they would take...
they're looking into like a swab type test or even a blood test, but that's going to cost money too. You know,
But they do for alcohol
Yeah.
too. So that's really not an argument that would stop it. But we do have to have some way of knowing that we're safe when we get in our automobiles, that we're not just out there on the roads with a bunch of people that are stoned and driving and,
Right.
and put ourselves at risk.
What
So
I'm surprised with is that it comes in a pill form that you could get at a pharmacy. Why wouldn't the state just approve that versus approving it for
Medic-
medicinal purposes and then people actually smoking it. I mean, if it is used for medicinal purposes, why not just leave it at the pill?
But we're not talking about medicinal. We're
Yeah.
talking about recreational.
When it was legal only for medicinal
Well, those
purposes.
laws were not really thought out very well.
Yeah.
If you knew how many times the medical marijuana laws were written, rewritten, amended, changed, additions, deletions, clarifications, it went on for years. And even to this day, if you read them, the common person would not understand what
Yeah.
they said.
I know
They're very
that
convoluted.
for me, an average person, it just seems like it became legal for medicinal purposes, and then all of a sudden, everybody's growing it, and
Yeah.
everybody's selling it, and
Everybody,
it's
yeah.
just available,
Because it was
and I'm
not
smelling
regulated.
it everywhere I go. So now it's like, okay, well, now it's legal for recreational purposes. I feel like it became legal in 2008.
It was.
You know,
Yeah,
so,
basically.
But
For all
what
practical
bothers me
purposes,
Because it
was.
was way too easy to get a medical marijuana card. It was
Yeah.
way
There
too
were
easy
people
to do all of
literally
that.
that we had arrested in our county that were selling medical marijuana cards out of their trunk. You know, doctors that were marijuana doctors, we
Yeah.
called them, that would literally just stand and say, okay, what's your problem? Oh, you have a toenail that hurts? Okay, medical marijuana card.
Yeah.
And then it went to the state licensing. They rubber stamped them all, and we had 50,000 people in Michigan that had medical marijuana cards.
Yeah.
Like
I think what
instantly.
bothers me is that the laws are there to protect the people. So to me, it just seems like, why would the state allow this? If something as simple as a pill that's sold in a pharmacy that can really be monitored and regulated is available, but they chose not to go that route
Right.
and then created what we have right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, you were asking a lot of legal questions, and one of the things people need to know too is that if you're on probation to any court for any reason, it could be pretty minor. It is right on your probation order, cannot use alcohol or drugs while on probation. So even though marijuana is legal, you still can't smoke it whenever you feel like it. You just
Yeah.
can't. There are rules.
And it's funny, a lot of the comments coming in are just, oh, we smell it, it's obnoxious. Somebody made a comment about, do you know that when you're growing it in your home, your kids come to school smelling like it? It's just, I agree with one thing that you said, the state approved it for medicinal purposes to desensitize everybody to it, and it's just there right now. It's there, and unfortunately, it's taken us to the next step now where it's legal for recreational use. And I do believe, I myself didn't even realize how restricted the law was. And I think there's a lot of people that are like me that just believe, you know, hey, I can go buy it and I could smoke it because I am smelling it everywhere, but you're really not allowed to do that.
But unfortunately, the consequences for violating that are so minimal.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see things like that change down the line too. When we start seeing the problems that are created, then we'll start creating new laws
Yeah.
that will deal with those issues, like on the drug driving. You're going to see that on what happens when somebody's out in public. Look what we've done with cigarettes. It used to be that you couldn't go into a restaurant or a bar to eat a dinner and not be just flooded with cigarette
yeah.
smoke. And now we don't allow that because it's obnoxious and people didn't want that.
Right.
I think we're going to get to the same place with marijuana.
And
is that
people
it's,
still can complain of the smell and things like that as like
Right.
a nuisance. You know, a neighbor that's growing too much, or people are outside smoking too much in their backyards, or things like that. Like there have
nuisance.
still been, yeah.
Right.
We're also forgetting that at one point alcohol was prohibited. Vanessa Denhagarmo, who is one of the producers of the show, she chimed in and said it took about 10 years to get medical law where it is today, the same issues with recreational. So at this point, are we looking at possibly another 10 years until?
oh, at least.
Oh yeah.
very
At least.
And then when do you see it being legal at a federal level?
I don't think I can, I mean, I would be guessing if I told you. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I think it's coming.
Yeah.
Yep. Viewers, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to share them with us. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And I, personally, this is all new to me. I'm learning, so you guys can help me ask these questions because I only have so many that I could ask. So back to the legal standpoint. How much can you actually have in your possession, and how much are you allowed to grow if you're growing it in your home?
I think the new law is 2.5 ounces that you can have, or 10 plants in your house. It's either
12
10 or
plants.
12.
Yeah, 12
10 or
plants in your
12.
house. You can have 10 ounces in your home, but locked away.
Right. It has to be in a locked container.
Yeah.
And then we have Jamie that just chimed in. It's the same as drinking and driving. It has to be locked up in your trunk. So what if you're driving
I'm
and
not
you
sure.
are caught with it? If it's within the legal limits and it's put away, would you
I mean,
get
for
in trouble?
medical marijuana, it had to be locked away. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm sure it can't be
I'm
just
sure,
like in
yeah.
the open seat. It's kind of like open alcohol in a car.
Yeah.
It has to be in a container.
In a container.
And that you can't be smoking it in the car while you're driving. You know,
So
that's
if you
that's
have
common
it with
sense.
if you have it with you, it's okay as long as it's within the legal limits and you're not using it.
Right.
And if you
Yeah.
use it, you can only use it in your home or a place where it's
not
an
public. Not
open
establishment.
to the public,
Open
yes.
to the
Yeah.
public. So we have a question here from Heather. Do you feel it speaks more to furthering moral depravity? Oh, I don't even know how to say this word.
Deprivation.
Deprivation. She has a deprivation in society. Do you believe that with marijuana being legal right now,
I
that
think
it's
we
bringing
have a
down the
problem
culture?
in general in society with people wanting to not feel and numbing feelings. And so I think this plays into that. I don't think it's going to exacerbate it any more than it already exists. We have way too much drinking, way too much pill taking. We take pills for everything. We take them to wake up. We take them to go to sleep. So we have breeded a culture that we rely on medications for everything. I look at the number of young people that are in college that are hooked on Adderall.
Yeah.
Because it's like we can't just make kids study hard. It has to be easier. We want everything instant now. And we've created a culture where kids just want to feel good 24/7, and that's not life.
No,
Yeah.
it
It's
isn't.
just not
That's
life.
not
I think that's the
realistic.
problem with society nowadays.
Right.
And that's why trauma, I feel like, is hitting people a lot harder too, because they are so numb to everything. When something does happen that they have to acknowledge and
coping
process,
skills.
they don't know how at all.
Yeah, we need to go back to teaching our kids coping skills, and that you don't just fix it with a pill or with smoking
A
marijuana
substance,
or
yeah.
with
Right.
drinking alcohol, and we've really created a culture around that. So it's a much deeper problem than just legalizing marijuana.
Right.
Yeah.
This is just one more
One more
thing
thing.
that adds to it.
Right.
Stephanie, have you noticed a rise in suicides at all, or just suicidal thoughts?
I don't know if the rise in suicide rates have anything to do with the marijuana, but I do believe that, like we said, I feel like people aren't using coping skills. I think things are being kind of numbed for them, and so when they are not, or when they cannot be, people are having a really hard time dealing with things. And I think that is going to be an issue. I think just with anything, with opiates, with alcohol, with any kind of drug.
Amphetamines,
Yeah,
benzos,
absolutely.
whatever.
You know, and so I think it's going to really not do a service to people to just be numb all the time. Like, we need to have the ups and downs. We need to be able to handle those things. And we also need to know when we can't handle them so that we can use the right resources, like counseling, like, you know, different teachers, or, you know, different friends or family to go to instead of these other unhealthy things. But I think it's going to impact a little bit. I don't know if marijuana per se is going to do that, but I think just having all of these things out there and accessible, and, you know, just no one needs to deal with life. They can just take a pill for that. They can just, you know, smoke that away, or, you know, forget about it for tonight and then until tomorrow night, you know? And I think also people thinking that it's not addictive. You know, I tell people all the time, if you tell me that it's not addictive, I believe you. Stop smoking it for a month and come back
Have
and
you
see
ever
me.
had anybody that has?
Not a single one.
Not a single
And I
person.
will tell you, I run a drug court, and I can get people off of heroin easier than I can
Absolutely,
marijuana.
yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I thought heroin was the worst of the
Well,
worst.
meth
and you-
is
yeah.
probably
Yeah.
harder. Crack cocaine is right up there.
Wow.
But I'm going to tell you, it's harder to stop smoking cigarettes and marijuana than it is to get off of heroin.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's also been normalized.
Right.
You go somewhere and you're smoking weed or you're smoking a cigarette, no one's going to look at you funny anymore. You know, but if you're doing anything else, any harder drugs, people are gonna like, whoa.
Take a second look.
Yeah, and so it's not something that, I mean, you go somewhere and even if you're trying to stop smoking and you smell it, and that triggers you to want it. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
So and also I think people who use marijuana are very adamant that it's not addictive and it's not, you know, and everyone thinks that they can just stop, but in reality, I don't think that
Yeah,
they
and
could.
THC levels are so much higher. A lot of people, I know that I would hear people my age that would say, well, I smoked it and I didn't get addicted to it. But this isn't your grandpa's marijuana. You know,
Yes.
what was smoked 40 years ago was such a minor amount of THC compared to what is in marijuana nowadays. And like I said, I'm just going to keep going back to it. We don't know enough about levels in marijuana to know what is the cutoff. I mean, we regulate how much alcohol it can be in the booze you buy. But do we know enough about marijuana to keep it at a level where it's not harmful for people? Those studies,
studies
haven't
are
been
not
done
there.
yet.
Yeah.
How frustrating is it, Judge, for the police officers because the law is so
Oh,
vague?
they're pulling their hair out.
I can only
We've
would
been
imagine,
judges
yes.
and police officers have been pulling their hair out over the medical marijuana laws for the last 10 years, and this is just going to exacerbate that
Can the law
completely.
be overturned?
Only by the vote of the people now.
That's not going to happen.
No.
I highly,
we've-
that would take a miracle.
Yeah, it's hard to unring a bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we have, somebody was asking, you cannot have the marijuana in your purse or glove box in your car? Is that,
I remember that being something for medical marijuana. Maybe it is still about this too, but you had to have it like not in arm's reach.
Yeah.
So that's
There are
probably what
laws,
that is.
and I haven't looked at the new ones with transportation of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there are regulations about how it can be transported from like a dispensary back to your home and stuff. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you have to be careful with that.
We have,
You
one
can't just walk
person-
around with gummy bears in your purse that are marijuana
Yeah.
gummy bears.
somebody, Beda chimed in, I'm sorry, with all due respect, you can't compare marijuana to opioids.
We're not trying to.
No.
Okay.
Nobody's
I
saying
mean, we're
that.
just saying that harmful substances are harmful,
They're
and
harmful
in any situation you're going to have.
I believe
some
in, I'm
kind-
not sure if she just chimed in, I think what we said was the
we
studies
didn't
were
know
not
enough about
there
it.
for
Right.
Yeah.
opioids and look
Yeah.
at the damage that it
Yeah.
caused, that we
Yeah,
just want.
opioids are deadly.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yes.
there is no comparison in the two drugs, and I don't think anybody here was saying that. We're just
No.
saying that we do things in our society where we kind of rubber stamp. Doctors were telling us that opiates were safe, and people were taking them very freely, only to find out that their lives were train wrecks down the line because they were addicted to it, and we've lost a large number of people as a result of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I'm just saying that we haven't done studies on marijuana to know the effects completely. Do I think it's going to be as severe as opiates? Not even close.
Not even close.
Okay.
Stephanie, Christine's asking, what resources or websites do you recommend for parents to discuss this topic with kids?
I don't know a lot about like parents discussing it, but you
Drug-Free
can go
America.
to yeah.
Yeah, Drug Free
Judge, you would know.
America
You
is a really good website for parents to go to for not only marijuana, but for any discussions about substance use disorder and safe use, that kind of thing. So that's one that just comes to my comes to my mind right off the top of my head. Is to just look there. There's all kinds of videos that they have. It's a very informative website for parents.
I don't know if like DARE still exists, but I mean they get a lot of resources in their schools too. A lot of people
Right.
will
I was
come in
just
and
gonna
speak
ask
to
you.
them.
Yeah, there's a lot
There's
of local coalitions.
Yeah, there's a
that
lot of local
are
coalitions.
doing education on this. DARE
That
does
will do
exist
like
in some
a-
schools, but it's self-funded, so communities have to agree. The government no longer funds DARE,
Yeah.
so it's not at the level that
Okay,
it
yeah,
used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Stephanie, what just as a therapist, what should parents watch out for if they sense that their kids are addicted or even just trying?
I think
these
changes
drugs?
in behavior, changes in attitude,
Changes in weight.
yep, weight, even their eating habits, their sleeping habits. If I just
Hunger.
feel like
smoking marijuana
yeah,
makes you hungry.
yeah, absolutely.
Munchies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think as a parent, we just know when something's off. So
Trust
if you
your
feel
gut.
like something's off, talk about it.
Yeah.
Get-
Trust your gut.
Yeah, absolutely.
your gut.
Yeah, that parents know their kids, and you know when something's off, and we don't like to face that all the time, and so
Yeah.
we'll make excuses like, well, maybe they're just going through this, or maybe it's just teenage years.
Yeah,
but
ask anyway,
if you,
talk anyway.
in your gut, feel like something's off, trust your gut.
Yeah,
As a parent.
definitely.
Claire is asking a question, at what age is a good age to discuss with kids about the edibles or something that's being offered?
I think it's the same applies as soon as they can understand. I think you should definitely talk to them because those are a little bit more dangerous because people don't assume that those are harmful things, you know? I've heard of many people, adults and kids, that have gotten into like an edible brownie or gummy bears or anything like that by mistake. And luckily the people I know were
I hear that
adults.
almost daily in
Yeah,
court.
all the time.
It's a
yeah, I'm
joke.
sure. But I mean, a lot of people do, you know, don't expect that. And luckily the people I know have been adults who were able to kind of sleep it off or, you know, like, you know, but, you know, we have to be very, very careful that kids don't get into that because we have no idea how much they're ingesting, how much was in it, how, like, I mean, nothing.
And you wouldn't be able to smell it, I'm taking, if it's...
No.
No.
Okay. Now, we have a question from somebody asking, it's Anwar, how about people with cancer? Is the pill better than smoking?
That's really something they would need to
Yeah.
discuss with their doctor. To me, if you have cancer and marijuana gives you relief, use it.
Whichever way you need to.
Whichever
you know.
way it makes you feel better. I know cancer patients that get a pill form of it. I also know cancer patients that have smoked it, and it does seem to really subside some of the pain. I think there's some really valid, great uses for marijuana. I want to make that clear. I'm not anti-marijuana across the board. I just think that we need to be careful with whatever we're putting in
Yeah.
our bodies. I mean, I'm careful with the food I eat.
Yeah.
I want to know
I have a
what's
hard
in it.
enough
I
time
want to know
taking
how much
Motrin.
sugar is in it. I
Yeah.
want to know all of those things
It's
because I
funny.
care about my health.
When
Yeah.
just reading about what some of the illnesses are that it could treat, there was a number of them. But just this morning, I was working out and I mentioned something about having just stiff joints all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, I think I'm starting to develop arthritis. Right away, my friend said, oh, you should get cannabis cream or something like
oil and
or
all that
oil
stuff,
or
yeah.
cannabis oil. And I'm like, what is that? You know,
Yeah.
I felt so dumb, basically.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you could just rub it and it makes you feel better.
But
I'm
there
like,
are other CBD oils that can help with
Can.
that don't
Yes.
have marijuana.
Yeah,
in it.
that don't
People
have the
always want to
THC.
jump to something that has more in it than what you need.
What's
I mean, there are
necessary.
some really good oils. I have kids in my drug court that use oils, but they don't have cannabis in them, and they get pain relief from it. You know,
Yeah.
they back injuries or whatever. So.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Claire, my kids are 7 and 5, and I constantly warn them about being offered things and not to take it. But I was told I shouldn't tell them that at this young age. 7 and 5? It's sad that you would think that a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old would be offered
I would
something.
be warning them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would be too.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, we are faced with people growing this in their house. So, like, if they go on a play date or they're at their friend's house or a friend's parent picks them up and has it, or, you know, they just need to know what they're up against, I think. And I don't think it's too young.
Especially, we have one viewer, Heather, that says there's a remarkable increase in ER visits in Colorado of children overdosing due to edibles after the legalization was passed.
Oh, I
So
believe
you're,
it.
I mean, it's sad to say you send your kids to a play date and you almost have to say, don't touch
eat
the
anything,
brownies.
yeah.
Don't eat anything at that
Unless you
point.
know what they are,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
it comes down to knowing the parents that you're sending your kids to, too.
Yeah.
You know, is having that honest discussion with the other parents of, you
Yeah.
know, I don't want my child to be around anything that
Yeah, it's
could be
drug-related.
dangerous. You know, having open discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
always keeping the lines of communication open.
Have them at your house instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep them home, yes.
And not to say that people that are growing it or whatever are bad people, but
No.
if that's not what you want your kids to be exposed to or be around,
Right.
that's your call as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely ask questions, talk to your kids about everything, talk to those parents to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Right.
So
Stephanie, how would you approach a family that's growing it in their home and you don't feel comfortable sending your kids there?
I don't know if it's I guess it's not my business to tell someone that they shouldn't do it, but I can just choose not to send my child there. I can,
Have play dates at your house.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's not my place to tell people how they should be like doing things, and
Not telling them how if you're a parent, and I could see it now. Obviously, my kids are older now, but if they were invited to a play date and I didn't feel comfortable sending them there, but they're really nice people, and I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I don't know.
I think I would just keep it very vague. Like, I want my children to be at home, or, we have a certain lifestyle that, you may not share, and we just kind of want to keep it consistent for them. I think consistency is very good for kids, and if you're teaching your child a certain way, you shouldn't expose them to other ways, that they are living like it's normal, so I would hope that parents don't get offended by that, but I'm sure that they will. But at the end of the day, it's my child. I don't really care.
Right. You have to do what you
You
feel
know?
is
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Ladies that are watching, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We have a few minutes left, and we would really appreciate it if you'd be able to send in any last-minute questions that you may have. Let's see. Oh, actually, we have, there's been a lot of house fires, too, because of marijuana growth in home, which is very dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if
that's
there's
true.
been a rise.
Yeah,
there
there
has
has
been.
been.
There has been.
Yeah. And then Fadia, I have teenagers, 16 and 13. How will I know if they did take anything? Also, it's a good idea to drug test them. And are you too paranoid of a parent if you're going to start drug testing your kids?
I think unless
If
you
have
really
a
have
suspicion-
reason.
I think if you have a suspicion, you
yeah.
should.
And I think
You
that your
know.
kids should know that if you do have a suspicion,
You're going to.
you're going to.
Yeah.
Because again, it's one of those things where if you don't follow through and you just ask them and then they lie to you and you give it up.
Yeah. My son has told his kids right from the very beginning that I will drug test you if I suspect anything. And he said, and not only is it because I want to make sure that I catch this early if it's going on, but secondly, it's a great excuse for him that my dad's crazy. He's going to drug test me when I
Yeah.
get home. And it's an out for a lot of kids to not give in to peer
Yeah.
pressure. And you have a right to do that with your children if you suspect they're doing something dangerous. It would be irresponsible to not.
Yeah. I always tell I have 4 sons. As long as you're living under my roof, it's my rules. And
Yeah.
if it's a matter of if I have to do something like that, I would.
Yeah.
As a parent, everybody has different parenting styles. To me, your kids are under your roof, they're your responsibility.
Yeah.
And they need to know how serious you are about it. Because if you don't drug test them and they get caught somewhere else, I mean, that's you don't want your child to have a record of any kind. You don't want a judge, a lawyer to recognize them. You don't want to be, that's a lot more severe than doing it yourself. And like your son said, catching it early, and for them to know you're serious about this.
It's funny, a lot of the moms that have chimed in that are really worried about sending their kids to somebody's house because they're 3 or 5 and the play date, then my youngest is 17. I think that's a
Yeah.
bigger worry, and I'm surprised that not as many parents chimed in about that, when you have teenagers and then, you know the family and they go there, at some point you want to trust your kids,
they-
but then you just don't know.
Yeah, at a young age, I think that you have more involvement with your kids'
Yeah.
friends. I mean, I did. When my
Yes.
daughter was young and my son, I knew the parents. I was in their
Yeah.
houses regularly. I would have known if they were growing marijuana in their
Yeah.
basements, and so I think what you do is you develop a relationship with those parents to where you get to know them and then you can trust what's going on in that household. You know, I don't think we want to put our kids in a bubble. They have to
Yeah.
learn to live in the real world. But at 3 and 5, I wouldn't be as concerned as I would at 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
Them going into that environment.
And I think the 13, 14, 15 age is where you threaten those drug tests, you threaten those, loss of privileges, things like that. And so that's kind of your way in that sense, because you can't tell your 17-year-old that because, you think or know that someone's growing marijuana that you don't want them there. That's going to be difficult because they're going to say, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to this or that.
Yeah, then you just and simply just say, well,
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin your friendship with this individual. Have them come to our house instead.
Yeah.
You know,
And treat it that way. Let's see here. Now everybody's talking about the teenagers. How do you deal with a family that did their best to keep their kids safe and then they end up smoking? The kids end up smoking.
I'm not sure there's an answer to that. I mean, you can be the greatest parent on earth and do everything right, and your kids will still make mistakes.
Yeah.
Peer pressure is huge.
Oh, yeah.
And so you just need to not beat yourself up. But if you see that it's becoming a real problem, then you need to get your
Get
kid help.
It's hard to believe, but our hour is up. Ladies,
Time
thank you
flies.
so much for sharing your thoughts with us. The video is available actually on the Moms page. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. Even later on, if you're watching the video, hopefully Stephanie would
Yeah,
be able
I'll
to
definitely.
answer. And then Judge Linda, I would gladly send any
Oh, absolutely. I'd be
questions
glad
over
to.
to you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us, and really
Thanks for
answering a
having
lot of
us.
my questions that I didn't even know about.
Fantastic.
So, and this is definitely one of those topics I think we have to really be on guard for as parents and as citizens.
Right.
Really, because I do believe there's a lot more to it that we don't understand.
Right.
But it is here. I think it is here to stay. And
We
we
just
have to
be
just be
careful.
smart, and we have to be careful and just to be mindful. Alcohol was prohibited at one point, so were cigarettes, and we managed to survive it. So hopefully
Yeah.
we'll be able to survive this.
Yeah.
And ladies, thank you for joining us. Feel free to ask questions, like I mentioned before, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.